All right, well, hi and welcome to this Ignite Webcast. My name is Josh Topal, and I work on the Office 365 team. And if you're new, Ignite events are a series of technical workshops for IT professionals and Microsoft partners. So, really excited to have you here. And this Ignite Webcast series will address different subjects and scenarios that are really beneficial to just anyone who wants to increase their knowledge of the Office 365 suite. So today we're excited to welcome back Jeff Medford to lead our webcast. Jeff is a technical product manager on the Office 365 team here at Microsoft. And in this webcast, Jeff will discuss part two of his FastTrack series. So again, today's session really provides just a great opportunity to hear from someone who works so closely with the product. And the webcast will be about an hour. We're going to leave 15 minutes at the end of the call to field any questions that you may have. So I ask that you do hold those questions till the end. You can type them into the IM chat window, and we'll get to all of them. One last thing is that we are recording today's session, and we'll have the slideshow that you see here and the recording up on the Ignite site. And since we are recording, please understand that you may be captured in today's presentation, but if you don't wish to be recorded, please don't type into the IM window, or you can simply leave the meeting and you can view it at a later time. And here's the link for where we're going to post the PowerPoint and where we're going to post the video later this week. So that's it for me. So Jeff, whenever you're ready.
Well, I heard Josh cut off.
Oh,
This is Jeff. Yeah, you still there, Josh?
did I cut off?
Yeah, that's all right.
All right. Well, Jeff, yeah, whenever you're ready, go for it.
All right, perfect. So thanks again, and thank you to everyone for joining. And we are going to talk a little bit more about Office 365 deployment from the standpoint of deploying Office 365 in production. And again, we've kind of wrapped this around the FastTrack deployment methodology. So when you really think about what this is, it's step 2 in the 1, 2, 3 steps of Office 365 deployment. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that all fits in. But thanks again for joining, and we'll just start working through. And as you have questions, please put them in the IM window, and we'll get to them either in context of what we're talking about or towards the end to make sure we get your questions covered. So this session really is to talk about going from a pilot, going from trying out Office 365 into deployment scenarios. So moving mailboxes, getting your email routing, your DNS records set up, all really the next steps when you're moving down the path of onboarding to Office 365. So in this agenda, we will talk about the deployment overview. We'll get into DirSync, understanding synchronization, understanding coexistence, and what that word means and what technologies are built around it, and really from a simple coexistence perspective. We'll talk more about understanding migrations from self-service and admin-led to migration options. So really talking about the deployment side of getting users and mail and Office on board from an Office 365 perspective. Wanted to just quickly highlight what we're talking about really fits along the lines of FastTrack and FastTrack deployment methodology, where really you start with the pilot, you start with utilizing the services with cloud IDs, being able to have full access to E3 and moving through a ton of the more business value scenarios, having that full Office 365 experience with minimal on-premises investments, that's really core to the FastTrack process, and then trying to really push on the service and the technology and the business scenarios without having to do a ton of infrastructure on-premises work, so that you're seeing the value of the service as you're moving forward into production. And then last time we really focused on the cloud IDs. And right now we're going to talk really about synchronized IDs and what's the next steps from DirSync and DirSync with password sync, etc. But this is kind of the baseline of the FastTrack methodology: is continue to build, no throwaway efforts, experience the service. We've, from a Microsoft perspective, this service is there and ready to be utilized with very little upfront effort, and then trying to roll that into your existing infrastructure or production is obviously where the steps start to get much more detailed. And when we look at it, it's a step 1, 2, 3 scenario. In the last session, we talked about step 1. This session, we're really going to dig into step 2 and talk a little bit about the next steps with step 3. But we're really going from a deploy into production scenario as we go. And when you see what that really looks like from a step-by-step, it's the core onboarding experience. And that's a big piece of the puzzle is core onboarding. So shared namespaces, and we're right there in that middle blue box. Shared namespaces, simple coexistence, external sites. You see some of the how around customer domains, directory sync, password sync, migrations, utilizing some of our automation technology from OnRamp to be able to do checks and balances and analyze your network, etc. And that's all part of the deploy experience, getting a group of users and moving fully into production and then moving out across the organization. So we will talk a lot about that blue section and everything that happens within there. So getting into it, what does that look like, the deploy experience? When we say what's added, we mean what's added from the pilot scenario. So in a pilot scenario, you have cloud IDs, you have full use of the services, but no integration from an on-premise perspective, except maybe connected accounts. When you move into the deploy, this is really where a lot of the work happens. And we've driven our funding and our Office 365 FY14 deployment offers directly around this blue section, this step 2. So we are right in the middle of where Microsoft wants our partners and customers to be deploying, and we actually have funding offers that are wrapped completely around this side of the Office 365 deployment experience. So it starts with that sign-on scenario where you're integrating your identity management. And this is not Active Directory Federation services, but this is with DirSync and maybe DirSync with password sync. We'll get a little bit more into that as we go. Integrated mail flow, and obviously, depending on the technology you currently have within your infrastructure, there are quite a few options from a mail flow perspective. If it's not Exchange in any way, shape, or form, you're looking at PST imports, IMAP migrations, starting with that new cloud mailbox, and then working through scenarios to get mail into those if it's necessary. With Exchange 2007, 2003, staged mail migration, obviously starting off with that new mailbox and then being able to import via that staged mail migration and or utilizing some of the IMAP or PSD technologies if it's more user-led. And then rounding up from an Exchange 2010, if you have that in place, you obviously are kind of a step up on everyone else, and you have managed mail moves, free, busy, cross-premises, no re-download of the OST. So really, depending on the technology you are today, there's a bunch of different options you can move through to get to the cloud. From a collaboration, we talk a little more about the Office setup and getting Office from an IT side, where you can start utilizing some of the click-to-run tools and Office deployment tools to really deliver on Office, the new Office as a service. Manage mobile connectivity, so being able to then really have your mailbox in the cloud. It's not just a connected account, but you're fully in production utilizing the cloud mailbox. And then from an admin perspective, going deeper into DLP and Exchange Online protection. So the requirements of that start to get a bit deeper from the pilot scenario. If you have Active Directory, we are saying Active Directory DirSync is probably a very good idea. And if you are looking at having not only cloud IDs, but DirSync IDs, password sync that is part of directory sync is another very good idea to start getting you down your path of unified GAL, synchronized to the cloud from users, and obviously from a password perspective, that's a huge step up from a user experience to be able to utilize their same passwords in the cloud and on their machines. You then start to look at DNS entries because from a shared namespace mail flow perspective, that is required. So these are all things that internally you can talk about and start getting the right people in line to start delivering on these pieces. And then again, I really already went into the mail setup and migrate, and we'll get a little deeper into that as we go through the options. Just to reiterate, from a deploy identity scenario, we've moved from cloud identity into the deploy scenario where we see on-premises identities being synchronized with the cloud through DirSync, and from a password sync capability that came out last spring. We've seen a huge uptake and a lot of customers extremely happy with being able to do DirSync with password sync before or in lieu of going through Active Directory Federation services. So being able to step up into a better type of experience from the end user without having to do a ton of infrastructure has been a key play for our customers and partners over the last 6 months or so. So that is the identity scenario we're going to go deeper into. Thanks, Daryl. Password sync works very well. We like it, especially as part of this process where if ADFS is absolutely critical from a business need, getting the customer through cloud identity into DirSync with password sync, giving them some of those end user pieces that feel right and feel like they need to be there from a password side. And then if ADFS is absolutely necessary from the business side, maybe they're doing multi-factor authentication or something outside of that, that is that next step to really go into ADFS. But it is, seeing our customers kind of go through that journey has been a big plus over the last month since password sync came out. So some of the things to, key deployment considerations, because as we're getting into things that will change the environment, deployment scenarios, funding available, this is where things really start to move. The assumption is that the customer has now purchased the service. So through pilot, through the sales cycle, and this is, if you're a customer on the line, this is an open conversation to say, we really feel like through a pilot, through the experiences, and through the sales cycle is a ton of information in best case scenarios that can help you make decisions towards Office 365. And we truly expect that in the deployment phase, this is something that's the commitment is made. We are working through deployment considerations with you and trying to get you on board very quickly and easily as you've kind of chosen Office 365 as that direction. So this is where it does get into some of that deep level conversation. We need to make sure, and from a consideration standpoint, start really thinking about the domains, all adding and managing all SMTP domains as verified domains before synchronizing. They cannot be removed until all synchronized objects are no longer using the domain as a proxy address or UPN. So these are kind of these are stickler things from us to you. Need to really work through these scenarios as you're planning. Plan UPN suffix, verify that the user objects on premises have a value and are not null. Default routing domains, these cannot be star.local. So things to consider as you are starting to move from that pilot scenario where you've kind of seen some of the value, seen some of the direction and what you want to do from an online service perspective. Really getting into how does this start to work with your domain? How does it start to work with your SMTP addresses? We highly suggest utilizing IDFix. IDFix is a tool that allows you to run against your current Active Directory, and it will spit out issues, allow you to resolve those issues, and really start the AD remediation process very quickly. And we've seen a tremendous amount of time cut off in the scenario by utilizing IDFix early on. The plan ahead for DirSync quota increase. There is a specific DirSync quota for X thousands of objects. That shouldn't hopefully be an 11th hour request, because if you have, I believe it's 100,000 objects or more, you just simply write a request in from a support perspective and able to move that forward. And we really hope that you think about that ahead of the 11th hour of deployment. Enabling that directory synchronization ahead of the DirSync server deployment could take up for 24 hours. So unless you're not using DirSync at all. That's just a consideration to have as you move. Understand how softmatch works, and we're going to go through that a little bit here. And then consider Exchange schema extensions for non-Exchange AD environments. So as you're considering these deployment scenarios and considerations, those are just some of the things we want to step in front of the game with and have lined out for you moving to Office 365. And then one of the next steps, which was the top one, is really adding and verifying your domain to your current running pilot. So currently, if you're in a pilot and working through Office 365 as a service, you have a cloud ID, and that cloud ID is your domain .onmicrosoft.com. Fully functioning, people log in with it. The first thing to do once you're starting to move to deployment is log in to the admin portal, the service health, or not service health, but go into the actual dashboard and then to the service settings. You'll want to go to the select domains, select add a domain. Step 1, and specify the domain name. Type the domain name, all very easy stuff. Preferred, confirm that you own Contoso or yourcompany.com. This is where we're going to make a check that you've added your verification DNS record. And again, a lot of customers who haven't experienced or gone through this might have questions like, is this making the changes permanent? Is this when my mail flow changes? Absolutely not. We are simply confirming that you own your domain. And we do that by that text record, so confirming ownership. And then that domain is verified, and you do not split your MX yet, but you simply put in that record so that we know that you own it. And it verifies the domain. Great. You are confirmed, and you now have the ability to set your domain, not the .onmicrosoft.com, but your domain as the verified domain, which all the users being synchronized in will have. Your email flow will be able to, we'll get into that as we go through your target addresses, etc. But you're good to go on your domains when you see that. And you can add many, many, many domains and have those as the addresses for your users. So you, like I said in that deployment consideration slide, you need to consider all the domains you're going to be syncing, and you need to go through this process with each of those domains. And this is usually with some of our smaller customers or customers who are not quite rolling down the real core IT Pro path, but they're trying to really work through these scenarios. We've tried to make it easy, but again, this is where confusion happens, where your customer doesn't quite understand the .onmicrosoft.com or what they need to do to get the DNS records rolling. And so this walkthrough is really a simple step-by-step. They need to have, or you need to have, access into your DNS or your provider to be able to add those records. And that really is the first step, which then, would I repeat how that does not impact the customer's MX record? All you are doing in that scenario is telling Microsoft you own that domain, and it's allowing you to build it within Office 365. If you didn't own that domain and you didn't have rights to your provider or DNS, then you wouldn't be able to steal domains from other people. This is proving ownership of a domain so that you can synchronize and build users with that domain. The MX record comes way later, and mail flow has not changed at this time. So hopefully that helps from that question. You're not changing the MX record at that time. You're simply telling us you own the domain. What is Azure AD Sync? Going into some of the details, it's an application that synchronizes your on-premises Active Directory with Office 365. Very simply put, it is a very simple appliance. It's designed to be software-based. Really, you set it up. You don't worry about it again. It does its thing. It has to sit off of your domain controller. It's really an x64 version based on FIM 2010, and it comes with is DirSync on a DC, a fully supported production deployment scenario? No, it is not. DirSync needs to be off. Is it now, Ryan? Tell me if it's changed. But oh, there we go. So breaking news to all of the yesterday. Are you kidding? I was in meetings all day yesterday. I didn't hear that. So breaking news came out yesterday. Thank you, Sean and Ryan. We will get some updates to these decks as we go. So there you go. Ignite community real-time information. Thank you, Sean. So DirSync on a DC, fully supported. Thank you, Ryan and Sean. So that'll help with having to have that appliance sitting off somewhere else in a VM or on another machine. Perfect. Thank you, Sean. So it comes bundled with SQL Server 2012 Express. There are limitations of how large you'll be to have to move off of that. And we'll get into a few of those as we go through. Enables coexistence. That is the number one purpose of DirSync. Provisions the objects in Office 365 with the same email addresses as in your on-premises environment. It provides that global address list. So when a user is on 365 and they pull up their GAL, they see all of the people and all of the objects and everything and all of the DLs that they would see on premises, and it allows that coexistence model so that they can send mail and have those objects even though they're a cloud mailbox and everyone else might be on premises. So I don't actually know the question, Phil, so we'll have to rely on the community who knows more about that than I do to help you, but I can follow up on that too. DirSync enables coexistence for Exchange. So whether you're doing simple or hybrid with Exchange, you have to have DirSync running to be able to do that. It's the enabler for mail routing. So it is really what enables the mail routing with a shared domain namespace across cloud to on-premises, and it also enables coexistence for Link. The second purpose is to help enable run state administration of groups, users, contacts. So all of the administration work you do remains in the Active Directory from a user, groups, and contacts perspective, and then those flow to Office 365 through the DirSync process. And it is an enabler for single sign-on. It's a mandatory component. So mandatory component for doing ADFS. So there's another question. We can get into what is fully supported and what is not fully supported when DirSync is on a DC. But thanks, Ryan, for asking that question and responding. I actually have that in a couple slides later. But really, it's not intended as a single-use bulk upload tool. I can't tell you how many customers I've talked to at Ignite events and going who say, hey, I've got all of these separate ADs or DCs, and I just want to do this one time and to get everything up there instead of using the CSV file or different methods. That's really not its intention. When you turn it on, it's quite a large process in the background. It takes 24 hours, and it starts syncing, and it is not a turn on, turn off scenario. That isn't to say that it can't be, if your DirSync server goes kaput or your appliance goes kaput, you can literally reinstall and run it on a different server very easy. So it's a very easy appliance-driven scenario, but it's not something to just do and then turn off because it does have effects from that perspective. So understanding what happens during synchronization. Synchronization scenario number one. Synchronize a single AD forest Office 365. The entire AD forest is scoped for synchronization, which is default. You can filter it based on OU, AD, domain, and user attribute, but the default piece is literally everything, and it's all user objects, all group objects, mail-enabled contact objects. So that is the synchronization number one. From the next scenario of synchronization, passwords is now supported. Most synchronization is from on-premise to Office 365, so it is mostly a one-way from your on-premises environment to Office 365. When you are in certain scenarios with Exchange Hybrid, you do have some write attributes, and it's some settings that you actually click on as you go through. And the default synchronization is every 3 hours. You can always force that to sync outside of schedule, but it's every 3 hours. And I think in a couple more slides we talked about it, but I wanted to say directly here, synchronization of users and groups, and that is every 3 hours. The password synchronization is as it happens. So you don't have to wait 3 hours from a password synchronization perspective. So that's a different scenario. So when we synchronize users, the user objects, mail-enabled, mailbox-enabled users are synchronized as mail-enabled users, not mailbox-enabled users. They're visible in the Office 365 GAL unless explicitly hidden. They're logon enabled but not automatically licensed. And the target address is synchronized for mail-enabled users. Regular AD users are synchronized as regular AD users. They're not automatically provisioned and mail-enabled. Resource mailboxes are synchronized as such. And one critical thing is synchronized users, and always get a lot of feedback on this, but synchronized users are not automatically assigned a license. If you are synchronizing users and then want to assign those licenses, you can do that manually through the portal or through commandlet through PowerShell. But as they synchronize, they are not automatically licensed in Office 365. From the groups and contacts perspective, group objects, mail-enabled groups are synchronized as mail-enabled. Group memberships are synchronized. Security groups are synchronized. Dynamic distribution groups are not synchronized. So these are just some critical things to understand as you're doing synchronization. Dynamic distribution groups are not synchronized. And then from a contact objects perspective, target address is synchronized, only mail enabled. Pretty simple from that perspective. When the objects are created, licenses are not automatically assigned, and not all on-premises AD attributes are synchronized. Existing user group and contact objects attributes are modified on premises, are then modified in Office 365. So I know I'm kind of just going straight through, but this deck is helpful in a way as you're thinking about what needs to happen and what actually the pieces are. When you delete from your on-premises AD, it will have an effect on Office 365. So contact objects that are deleted from on-premises, existing users, groups, they will be deleted from Office 365. And when user objects are disabled on-premises, they are disabled in Office 365. The license is not automatically unassigned. So to go along with the fact that licenses are not automatically assigned, they are not automatically unassigned. So licensing from the Office 365 perspective is handled outside of your Active Directory synchronization. So from a cycles, and I think there's a thing from Ryan Phillips talks a little bit about the size and objects. But first synchronization cycle after installation is full. It's a little bit time consuming, approximately 5,000 objects every 45 to 60 minutes. Plan ahead if you're doing tens or hundreds of thousands of objects, as that can take some time. And if you're on a Friday night and trying to do this for something that you're going to work on that night or on Saturday, it's a bit of a gotcha. So make sure you're planning ahead for the amount of objects in your synchronization schedule. And once it is fully synchronized, deltas are then employed, and it's much faster. Ownership and scoping. Once implemented, the on-premises AD becomes the source of authority for synchronized objects. So modifications must occur in your on-premises AD. And really, the synchronized objects, when you are in the administration portal, they cannot be modified or deleted. It has to come from your Active Directory. And we did want to highlight that when we talked about it in the last session, the ability to DirSync only a subset of users is there from an OU, domain-based, or user attribute. And we have step-by-step guidance on TechNet for that. So getting through these text-based slides, powering through it, object matching. I wanted to talk a little bit about hard match and soft match because it does come into play quite a bit when you think of piloting the service. You have a ton of users who you've built on cloud IDs, and now it's time to DirSync. And the ability to do that is in play, and it's referred to as a soft match. So it will actually pick up those users who you had built with cloud IDs, and it will soft match against those when you DirSync. So from a step-by-step process, you're able to move from cloud IDs to DirSync IDs with that soft match capability. And that's a big part of moving from pilot to deploy, is just making sure that all those users stay moving through, there's nothing throwaway, and they continue moving forward as you're DirSyncing. There is a proxy address synchronization. It requires a matching verified domain. Again, like I said, it's critical to think about your domains and to get them verified before you run. They're synchronized attribute even after a license assignment, so those will flow through from your on-premises. DirSync quotas. I said 100,000. I was actually wrong. It's 50,000. I don't know where I got 100,000, but I have too many, I guess, escalations in my inbox. But by default, only the first 50,000 objects are synchronized. You can increase that to 300,000 objects automatically once first vanity domain is verified. Quota limit can be increased by contacting technical support. Deleted objects count against your quota for up to 30 days. So if you have large amounts of AD objects, a couple things to really think about before you flip the switch on doing DirSync. And here's my favorite slide: synchronization miscellaneous. And Ryan already put it in the IM window, but 10 gig SQL Server 2012 Express Edition database file is estimated to max out at the magic number of 50,000 objects. So you will need to have a copy of SQL Server that is not the Express Edition if you're moving forward with more objects, etc. So that's kind of what he just said, and that's what we're talking about. And all of the authorization synchronization happen over SSL. So I am going to bounce to the objects flow, and actually giving you a picture of what this looks like. When you have a sync cycle from Active Directory, it's going to import the users, groups, and contacts from your on-premises AD into what is represented as a different server, but could be an appliance or VM or whatever it is you want to do. And now sounds like you can do it from a DC. Obviously, we'll all need to read some of those links a little deeper to see if it's production ready, but we can get into that and talk about that on further stuff. Thanks, Sean. Very helpful for your feedback. So the sync cycle happens with directory synchronization. It then, from your DirSync server or appliance, it will then sync to Office 365 from the provisioning web service coming from Windows Azure Active Directory. That's when it hits those users, groups, and contacts for Office 365. You can see what is going there. It's exporting the users, groups, and contacts from the actual connector through the export. You see the success status, and then it goes up to Office 365. There are write-back attributes in certain scenarios, and the directory synchronization appliance will write back to the AD in those scenarios. So from a user kind of view or perspective, this person is a mailbox enabled, has a proxy address of john.doe, and that person gets synchronized over, and you can see the SMTP address, and then the base SMT, the contoso.onmicrosoft, contoso.mail.onmicrosoft, with those are proxy addresses, and then the target address is obviously his john.doe@contoso.com. So that gets synchronized over and used for authentication, for Exchange Online, SharePoint on Link Online. So that information, once it synchronizes into Windows Azure Active Directory, is then used across the board for the various services of Office 365. So I did want to go through and show, if you haven't done DirSync before, it is fairly simple and very simple. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And obviously, with the caveats and things to think about, there are technical things to really get into before you're dir syncing, but the actual process is very easy. Logging into Office 365, going in and selecting users and groups, and you can see there in the administration portal, dir sync, click setup, and it will kick you into a pretty quick and easy wizard that says, do you want to activate directory synchronization? Absolutely. Are you sure you want to activate it? Absolutely. And then it says, hey, while Active Directory synchronization might take up to 24 hours, here is the download for the directory sync tool. And then you can download and review the documents, get the tool running, and obviously it might take up to 24 hours to be successful, but that is the next steps. So you get that directly from the admin portal, and once you're on your off of your DC or on that DC if it's supported in your environment, once you start installing DirSync, it's very simple. And I'm just going to walk through some of the screens here, but it's accepting the terms of use. Where do you want to install it? Installing components. Next. Start the configuration wizard after you install it, and that pushes you to the configuration. You will have to have your Windows Azure Active Directory admin credentials, which are your Office 365 admin credentials. Very simple. It's logging into the cloud at this point. And then you need your directory enterprise admin credentials for your on-prem. Enable hybrid deployment. This will only allow you to be enabled if you are doing write back and have Exchange and it's actually found that. So this might be grayed out for you, but depending on your environment, it might be there with you to be able to check back. And that does the configuration of write back. We talk about password sync a lot. It's a click of a button during your config of DirSync. Right there it says enable password sync, and that will literally enable password sync. There is no more configuration that's necessary. It is now creating the configuration, and then it will complete. And this does not mean it is complete, because you then have to say synchronize your directories now. And this is what kicks it into that 45 to 60 minute per 5,000 scenario. And that is it. It is next. Obviously, it's doing a lot of magic in the back end, and that's why it's a very important feature for us. But from an end user, you, IT pro guy or woman or person, you can do it very easily and get it rolling. So password synchronization, which is really critical from an end user experience. Our end users of all systems expect passwords to be the same as Windows, the same as Office, the same as other things they use. So this was introduced a few months ago and was in beta for quite some time. And really the benefits are it's a single set of credentials, your UPN and your password coming from your on-premises AD. It's fully integrated into the DirSync appliance. It's a checkbox, so very simple, fully integrated, and it has no requirement for ADFS. So it keeps the deployment simple, eliminates a bunch of upfront costs from the deployment scenario, and you can then work ADFS in right after if that's something that's necessary. So when you think of how easy it is to go from a cloud ID to a synchronized ID with password sync, you then can move those IDs into your ADFS scenario as needed. Does not require nor access the plain text password. That's really critical. There's no requirement for AD reversible encrypted format. It's a hash and then hashed again using non-reversible encryption, and it gets synchronized to Azure AD. So pretty straightforward. This is the conversation we've been having a ton with security folks and how it fits with their scenarios, and we've had a ton of great success. So, but it is a question that always comes up, is like, wait, are you sending my passwords over the wire? How does this actually happen? So some of these documents, and there is an entire Ignite session about identity that also draws down into this. One-way synchronization and complexity is implemented from the on-premises AD, that is the master policy. So Password expiration policy in the actual Azure AD is set to never expire, and the expiration in sync is driven by your events. So that is the identity kind of section. And a couple of things I wanted to now dig into is once you have your identity set up, and obviously we spent a ton of time on it because it's hugely important, we're then moving into mail and the actual move of mailboxes, simple coexistence, understanding what coexistence is. Coexistence, in a very simple form, is there are users who are on premises in your environment, and there are users who are in Office 365. And some mailboxes are in your on-prem, and some mailboxes are on Office 365. Those users, no matter where they're sitting, see the same objects in their gal. Everything is the same, and that mail is routed seamlessly from the end user perspective to Office 365 and back. So that is really what simple coexistence really means. It is uses DirSync from a gal. Cloud identities are federated and does not require any on-premises hybrid server. So it doesn't require any kind of on-premises infrastructure except for that DirSync appliance. When you look at what mail routing is, when mail comes through that MX record, and as I said earlier, you have not changed the MX record yet with your deployment. As the mail comes in, it is then being received by the Exchange server. Excuse me. The Exchange server sees that mailbox enabled proxy. Yep, sees John Doe. Delivered. So this is before you've done anything. Simple mail routing. We've probably all seen that 1,000 times. On-premises to Office 365 mail routing. So the MX record still has not changed. Someone from outside your organization is emailing. It goes into that user object mail enabled, not mailbox enabled. The proxy address with a target address. So it then says, whoa, what am I looking for? I'm looking for that target address after the proxy, and it pushes it through the MX record of .onmicrosoft.com and into Office 365. And that logon enabled user who is mailbox enabled has these proxy addresses. It's going to look and then be able to say, yep, there is that address, and I'm sending it to this person. Meanwhile, that person has their same exact SMTP address, login, password. All this mail routing happens, completely out of their line of sight. What does it look like when someone on premises emails someone who's online? Well, it goes the same route to the Exchange. It then looks up the proxy, moves through the target, and then sends it out through that MX record of the .onmicrosoft.com and lands in Exchange online and goes to that SMTP mail address. So either way, whether you're outside the org, inside the org, it's going to go through that same routing process. Now, if you're someone who is online with Office 365 and you're sending an email to someone who is maybe online, maybe not, it asks for that SMTP, finds the target address, sends it out of Office 365, down through the MX record to your Exchange server, lands in that user's mailbox. So it doesn't go backwards down through, it does it all the way out and then continues through your MX record and goes through. To that person, it looks like an email coming in from the SMTP address they would expect. And as we've talked about and we do talk about in a lot of the hybrid stuff, those emails and those people in the gal will look external if you dig into the properties of that person. But from a mail routing, it's all part of the same routing and the same name. So hopefully that makes sense. I always find it helpful when those pictures move things along, and even if I have to click 10 times, I like the way it shows it all going through the different steps. So when you think about the migration options, you have your names, you have your people, you have your gal, you have mailboxes that are in the cloud. Maybe you started with a fresh mailbox, or maybe you're going to do a staged migration. That's when you need to really understand the options. And this is, I guess, our way of saying, hey, all of these things matter in your deployment. How big are you? What kind of coexistence? What kind of provisioning? What are you looking for? Self-serve, excuse me, features. We have a lot of customers who simply say, we need to get online. We do not want to move 10 years of mail. We want to move X amount of days, or we want to start fresh and have users move. We have so many different opportunities from our customers that going in and telling someone, hey, you need to move your entire mailboxes, if it doesn't fit their needs or their actual how their business needs to run, sometimes it becomes a sticking point, and our customers say, you know what, that is way too difficult, not something we're looking for. Keep thinking. And we're seeing a lot of that when it comes to moving mail from older technology is, do we really need to move all this mail? Is it something that's critically important? And that's just all part of the discussion that we're having with our customers. From a technology standpoint, you have a bunch of different options. You have PST migration, IMAP, staged exchange migration, and hybrid deployment. You will notice there is no cutover migration in this FastTrack deployment methodology, because cutover migration is a different beast, and it's when someone is literally saying, I'm going from here, I don't have any users built, and I am moving to online immediately through a cutover. Absolutely valid, but when you think about it through the pilot, through the deployment pieces that we look for from a faster type of fast track, and I see your question, Zolt, and I don't have a quite the answer for you yet, but I will get to that in a couple minutes. But you see here the matrix of what you can do from which technology, what we are taking a stance. The deck will be available on Ignite, definitely with the recording. So it'll be available as we go. But we also have self-service, and sometimes partners and even some customers kind of saying, yeah, we would never really allow that with our, which is understandable, but we have an increasing amount of customers who are saying, let's get our cloud mailboxes and our experiences online and let the end users start to plow through what they need to from a PST or connected accounts. So it is a something we want to highlight as possible. Absolutely possible is self-service and driven, or admin driven from a PST perspective. We have tools that are able to then capture PSTs and have them implemented. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into a couple. From an IMAP migration, prepare for IMAP, create the CSV, create the endpoint, migration batch, start the migration batch. When that batch is rolling, that's when you configure the MX record pointing to Office 365. So IMAP migrations coming from other technology, coming from other services, they don't have a coexistence type of model. Coexistence requires some sort of exchange server, 2003, 7, 10, 13, whether you're doing coexistence rich or simple. But IMAP is you are pulling those mailboxes, and then you're switching that MX record when those things are moving through in the batch. And when you look at the migration process, it's configuring IMAP server from a connections. It's verifying that email domain, creating the users and mailbox, whether you're doing manual bulk or DirSync. And then really from an MX perspective, because you are moving those people's mail with no coexistence, you want to set that time to live to 15 minutes. Create a dedicated migration admin user that can reach across all those mailboxes and add those permissions from a preparation standpoint. As you go through, define that in CSV files. We allow batch migrations. You can see the CSV file limits. Keep those CSV files in a secure location because it does have information regarding your mailboxes. And then newly arriving mails land where MX record points to. So there is no redirect. We're not doing a redirect that you saw with some of that coexistence. So that is where you really need to think about the timing of that MX record. Is it when it's going to hit a mailbox when it comes in, and you want to time that properly to the online service. Now we're going to talk about exchange migrations staged, and this is really going to round out the scenario from a deployment perspective. A staged Exchange migration starts with preparing, and again, we've done our identity. Those users are there. We're creating that CSV file for stage migration, creating the endpoint. There's a batch that you need to do, and there is a specific amount of people in each batch. And you don't see anything here that says max record. So again, when you're doing stage migration from Exchange, you can continue to have your MX record pointed at your on-premises until you're ready to flip that. So you don't see that here from the stage migration. You do need to add and verify that domain. You need to have DirSync. You need to configure Outlook Anywhere on your current environment, 2003 or 2007, because that's what we're going to use to connect and move in these batches. You can deactivate DirSync after migration, but again, we gave you the guidance that said this is something that should be continuing. It's not just an upload tool. And if you have 2010 and 13, you can do hybrid in that environment. Multiple batches, again, creating a migration admin account so that you can reach in through that Outlook Anywhere and be able to pull in those mailboxes, test the endpoint using the Exchange remote connectivity analyzer, which is available through TechNet, and it's also through the FastTrack steps. Move work groups together. That's a big best practice. If you have people working in groups that are typically, communicate with each other internally, move them together for one simple reason: is simple coexistence and stage migration does not have free busy between on-premises and online. So moving people who are working together is a very good way of looking at your migration points, because then they can have those full experiences with their own group, and maybe some of that less rich experience with people outside their group. Start the batch by uploading the CSV file. Users start with empty mailboxes and they start to fill in. The example scenario here is saying, hey, started at this time. They'll be synced during the night, reconfigure the Outlook profiles, and allow sync during the night. And again, that will be something that they'll need to re-download their OST file. Simple coexistence. Emails still arrive on premises. Like I mentioned, there is no MX record switch yet, and it's forwarded if the mailbox is migrated. From a best practices, you want to set those people in groups, get them in their batches, and get these things moving. And really, the step is, once everyone's moved online, you're able to then switch your MX record and then deprovision your Exchange that's on premises if you don't have any mailboxes left. No need for incremental syncs. Outlook will rebuild the OST, and that is right where you start your end user communications to say, hey, we have moved, we've switched, here's the great stuff that's available to you, and let's move forward. So then you can reconfigure, decommission. I kind of got ahead of myself talking about decommissioning. Stage migration is not a long-term solution. It really is to get those mailboxes up and then get those mailboxes off your current environment, 2003 or 2007. The simple coexistence is not something we see customers wanting to run in the middle of for very long. So, talking about ProPlus, and I know we've been heavy on identity, heavy on Exchange, but that tends to be a lot of the questions we get and a lot of folks joining the calls. Obviously, Office 365 includes Office 365 ProPlus. During the pilot, users can directly install that from within the portal. During your implementation and moving those customers to deploy and really production, you have a ton of tools through the Office deployment tool, and being able to utilize those to deploy using your own in-house technology to push those changes and pieces out there, and using some of the Microsoft tools we've made available to really deploy those out to the end users. So they got to be admins, and you have to be able to push that stuff out, and Office deployment is a big part of the entire experience, where their mailboxes are online, their namespace is all good, their experience, a new way of being able to connect to Exchange online, and then layering in Office, new features, new capabilities, and click to run is a huge part of getting your users fully up on board with the service. And I went a little long, but I wanted to say next steps. All of this sits on Ignite. Ignite is as transparent as we can be with all these decks. Obviously, I'll make some changes talking about the being able to run DirSync on a DC, and then those changes hit ignite.office.com. If you're looking to deploy Office 365, really focusing in on the FastTrack deployment methodology, all of these decks from our sessions that we do around the world and on these webcasts are there, and videos, click-throughs, guidance, it all sits there on Ignite, and hopefully you guys are finding this to be a really great resource, because we're putting everything directly from our technical product management team and from engineering hits this site for readiness. So I would say that's, you're already on this call, so you've been there and know about it, but there is a ton of great content. We lined it out almost exactly how I've been doing these sessions, so that you can step right through the process. So I will hit a couple of those questions. Are we prepared for a huge number of public folder migration already? It's a great question, and I don't quite understand the thought of, like, are we ready? The service is ready. Whether the customer is ready or utilizing tools that are ready, the service is ready from public folder migration, and there is actually a session within, I believe, the Exchange tab of Ignite that talks specifically about migrating from public folders and public folder thoughts and experiences. Easier way to move a client from small biz family plan to enterprise yet. We are not yet, I don't have anything to announce. I know that there are issues with trying to go between SKUs. Perfectly there. Thank you, Josh, on the public folder session. Zolt, I would hope that you go to that session, and then obviously if you haven't reached out to the kind of escalation teams, you can definitely follow up offline. Oh, there you go. So client from small biz family, we don't do SKU moves that I know of yet. So that is probably still not an easy draw. So guys and ladies and gentlemen, really appreciate the time. Hopefully this is helpful. We went through a ton of content, and again, it's right there for you to download. From pilot to deployment, these are the steps. This is the stance. Getting customers on board and getting yourselves on board if you are a customer very quickly and easily. And also knowing what's coming next, and knowing that, hey, if we're thinking about doing ADFS, let's start with DirSync and password sync and move our way into that experience. So hit the polls, and because we really love getting your feedback, and let us know, like Josh said, let us know if you have any questions or want to send us a message for upcoming engagements. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Have a great morning or afternoon or evening wherever you are. Thank you so much.